welcome back to another episode of The Linguistic Isle. I am your host, Teacher Greta, and this evening I'm here with a wonderful guest who is about to introduce themselves. So here we are, where we look at everything through a linguistic aisle, from a linguistic aisle. So tonight, my guest is Miss Glenda York, and I'm going to ask her to introduce herself and tell me your language story. Take it away.
Okay. So my name is Glenda, like Berta said. Born and raised on St. Martin. My mom is from Nevis. My dad is from here. Um, my language, my language journey. I would say I grew up English in my household. Again, my mom is from Nevis, so she only spoke English. My dad spoke Dutch because he grew up in the Dutch system, was part of the army, went to school, Dutch side, everything. But in my household, I only heard English spoken. I have some cousins whose dad is from Curacao, so I've heard the Papiamento from there. But I've only known Dutch until about, I think it was third grade. They started teaching Dutch when I
Yes.
was going to school. So that was I think my first introduction. I can't remember hearing it before. That was my first introduction to another language, to learning another language, I should say. And I think from the start I was fascinated by it, by just learning something different. And then when I went to high school, um, then you had Dutch as a language, and then you had French and Spanish. And I was still fascinated with learning Dutch because I don't know if it was because we were Dutch or or maybe hearing my cousins speak it. I'm not sure what it was, but I was fascinated with learning Dutch. I really wanted to get better at speaking Dutch. Didn't quite make it there, but I was intrigued. Um, French, me and French did not get along. As soon as I was able to get out of that, I dropped that. I tried. I really tried, but it wasn't working. And then they gave me the option. I just let that go. No remorse. I'm okay. Uh, I I I stuck with Spanish. Um, Spanish I liked. I could grasp it a little bit easier than the French. Unfortunately, I didn't put that much effort into it, so I didn't fully grasp it. But I still remember a few things. It stuck for a bit. But Dutch was what I wanted to learn. To go with. I think that was it. And then when I went to college, I went to an American university because for me that I identified more with that than with going to Holland and the Dutch lifestyle. And that seemed more foreign to me than going to the US. So again, we have English predominantly spoken, Samaritan English, but
Mm-hmm.
English nonetheless. And then it's funny because my husband is Curacao. He speaks English, Dutch, Papiamento, and a little bit of Spanish.
Oh,
So yeah, that is my impression of that every time. It's like
yeah.
you speak a lot of languages. I speak English and
Right, right.
making my way through Dutch. So that was definitely a plus in that area. And then after Irma, we ended up in Holland. Um,
Oh, I'm
and
gonna
then
go
it,
to that question. I have a question specifically about that for you.
okay.
So I'm
Am
trying
I
to figure.
jumping ahead? Should I wait?
Yes, yes. Wait, wait. We're gonna stay right there because
Okay.
there's a lot. There's so many things you said that I wanted to pick up on. But I was like, oh, okay. I learned some things, and I had some questions for you. So let
No
me
problem.
go back now and ask you. Tell me about your career and lifestyle. Does language play a role in anything that you're doing? Tell us what do you do?
Um,
Because I know
what
you
do
do
I
a lot.
do? Right. I do quite a few things. I'll stick to what I do for myself. For myself, I describe it as destination marketing. So I have a hospitality and tourism management background. So tourism definitely is what I like to do. Customer service is something I automatically do regardless of what field I'm working in. I focus on hospitality. Um, so I have my own platform, GCY Initiative, where I do destination marketing from what I call a locals perspective, but it's basically showcasing the uniqueness of St. Martin people, and yeah, just us and our lifestyle and how we live. As far as what role language plays, going back to high school with the languages, while I wanted to learn Dutch and Spanish, I also took an English interest in English because I couldn't comprehend, and this is not to insult anyone else, but I couldn't comprehend how someone that spoke English regularly, not as a foreign language, but someone that spoke English regularly could do basic English. Because
Mm.
for me personally, it everything that I was taught as far as the English language, for the most part, it just made sense to me.
Right,
Like
right.
as far as present tense, past participle, and the continuous verbs. And I think the only thing that up to now I can't get is transitive and intransitive verbs. I know the term, couldn't tell you what they are, but um, English definitely played a role, and being able to speak it well was important to me. I don't think anyone made me feel that way, but I think for myself, I just wanted to make sure that I was speaking it properly.
Mm.
Um, so as far as my work life, if you catch me in my house on the road, as a former boss told me, I speak like I'm from Middle Region, but if I'm talking to someone, if I'm in my professional atmosphere, then my word usage changes,
Mm-hmm.
my pronunciation changes. They tell me that I yank. I'm okay with that. But I know
You
the
code
way,
switch. You know when you need to code switch for which
yeah.
event you
So,
get.
and it just so happens to sound like an American accent because I grew up watching American TV. So
Mm-hmm.
when I when my language when I pronounce certain words, I don't think that I'm trying to sound American. When I'm trying to sound American, I will sound American. I do purposefully sound an American, and I do pronouncing my words fully. There's a difference. I'm conscious of that difference. But for persons, is when I pronounce my words fully, then I'm yanking,
Yeah,
which
I know what you
if
mean.
that's what it sounds like to you, that's perfectly fine. But when I'm at my work atmosphere, when I'm interacting with persons, um, like no, my wording changes. The way that I pronounce my word changes. I take my time. I try to speak a little bit slower.
Right.
So as far as like different languages, I don't tend to use it, thankfully. Anytime I have to speak Dutch to someone, I'm like, I don't speak that much Dutch because I'm very insecure with it. I
Mm.
think I know it good enough, but when I have to speak it to someone that is fluent, I feel like, no, let me not embarrass myself. Let me just keep
Yeah.
that very basic. And but that I think that's as far as the role that language plays in what I do from
Yeah, and
time to time.
you
I hope I
said
answered your question.
yeah, and you said a lot because maybe not how do you say it? I don't know to say another language plays a role in your job, but you mentioned a lot that you are switching between your Semat in English and a more, let's say, standardized form of English that some people call American. I thought that was interesting because I remember having that happen with me and Samuel too. Like one day we picked up somebody, some friend of his he knew on the side of the road. And when we were talking to each other, he was just like, y'all ain't from here. I'm like, why would you say that? But it's just like
Mm-hmm.
because if I think there's this notion that if you're speaking, let's say grammatically correct, it's like, oh, okay, then you're
Mm-hmm.
thinking American. They didn't have where to place it. So quite common. So
Mm-hmm.
now I'm gonna go to the questions that where you were kind of leading to, because I had a note that I know that you spent some time in the Netherlands, and you also mentioned
Mm-hmm.
that you went to school in the U.S. So I want to know what kind of cultural shocks did you have from that time period, language related, living in the Netherlands and also living in the U.S.
Okay. Language related. I'm trying to think. In Holland, I think that would be the easiest, the language related differences.
Or just
Um,
in general, any culture shock.
I think what's sticking out to me was when like because when moving to Holland, we were looking for a job. I was looking for a job. My husband got a job quicker than I did because he spoke the language. He was already familiar with that whole the country and the way things are done there. So it was new for me because I had only visited Holland once before at that time. So that was on vacation. This was not vacation. So I had to adapt to the situation. In looking for a job because I wasn't fluent in Dutch, I began to take Dutch classes. So I'm very happy where I am right now because I think I understand way more than I did at first. But I started taking Dutch classes. So when I was at home, I would practice with my father-in-law and my brothers-in-law and everything. And my brother-in-law, who they grew up in Holland, but he would tell me that I speak Dutch with an Antillean accent. And I was like, for me, I'm just speaking Dutch, but I don't hear the difference. When my father-in-law speaks Dutch, I just hear the Dutch. But because he grew up there, like he hears an accent with how I speak the Dutch, which I thought was funny. I was just,
I think it's interesting. Very interesting.
I'm just speaking. But it was very cool. And then one thing that I did like that everybody, well, at least the people that I interacted with, everyone was very understanding of me trying to learn Dutch. So again, of course, in my class, everyone there was also, some of them were very good in Dutch, but they needed an official paperwork or whatever to say that they were good in Dutch for job purposes. But when I would go to the center, the town, I guess Centrum, I don't know specifically how that translates, but when I would go to Centrum, with all the stores and everything, like I would try to make myself practice it because when I go, they would tell that I'm struggling, so they would try to speak, not try to, they were actually good. They would speak English for me so that it would be easier for me. And I had to tell them, no, I have to practice. I'm trying to get better at it. So a lot of the times, like in the Centrum, the people would try to speak the English for me to get better. So then I had to practice. But if I go to the supermarket, most of the time, the persons in the supermarket didn't really speak English. So I really had to push myself to figure out what I want to say, or if I don't know the word, what word can I use to convey what it is that I'm trying to ask the person. So more times than not, it worked. There were a few times the person was still lost and I was just like, okay, and then look for another person to help me. But more times than not, it helped. Google Translate definitely helped a lot in that instance also. In the US, I can't think of a lot of language culture shock because, like I said, I grew up on American TV. I feel like that just prepared me. I think that was part of why why I was okay with going to the States. I feel like that just prepared me because you hearing how they speak and a lot of the slang that they use. So in going into that community, country, a lot of the words that they were using, the sentences, the phrasing, it wasn't that much of a change. Like living in the country was a culture shock in itself. Adapting to not being at home and all that type of thing. But as far as language, it wasn't that difficult for me to adapt. I just remember instances where the friends that I had that were also from St. Martin, because they were like four of us. Three of us stayed in the same building, and then Sanji stayed, she was living somewhere else. So between the four of us, we made friends, of course, with people that live in our building. And when we were talking, like if we're talking to each other, we talk in a St. Martin accent, we talking to anybody else, I would make sure to switch and then I would yank because I got tired of repeating myself 3 and 4 times and you're not understanding me. So what gets this done quicker is me switching my accent so that you understand what I'm saying and we can move on. So, but when me and my friends would talk to each other, people would watch us like, what are you saying? Like for them, it was like we were speaking another language and we were like, no, we just speak it. But that's when I realized like we really do talk fast. We talk quickly because when we're talking to each other, like talking like this, you're saying your words, you're going slowly, you're making sure you understood. But then when we're talking to each other, we just talking fast, we just talking however it is we want to talk because we're trying to say some things to each other.
Right.
And it was funny that they couldn't fully understand what we were saying. And then what we would do just to make it worse is like when we like if they got accustomed to us and they were like kind of understanding what we were saying, because now we're doing it for spite. So if they were kind of understanding what we were saying, now we purposely talk even quicker between each other just to see if they're gonna catch on to what it is that we're trying to say. So that was always that was a fun experience. And then I remember when I was working at a Holiday Inn, my friend called me on the phone, on the job phone nonetheless. She called me on the phone and we're talking. And I get my boss and one of my coworkers is there. Thankfully, my boss was a cool guy. My boss and my coworker is there. So I'm talking to her and something we were talking about the car. So I'm da 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 and the car, and I'm talking because they're paying extra close attention to me because they see my accent has changed. And my boss is like, she's saying something about a car, and he started to tell me like our accent was close to like a Boston accent because the
I was
Boston
gonna say car.
they don't pronounce their R's either. So it's like that's interesting, but they were trying to like pay attention to me speaking in a different way than they're accustomed of interacting with me. And I remember also when I had left that job to pursue my master's, I was like telling the different co-workers that I worked with, the persons that worked in the restaurant, because I worked at the front desk, and the restaurant manager there, because I didn't have a lot of interactions with him, so he didn't know me that well. I don't know him that well. So as I'm speaking to him, like I'm telling him, like I need to get I think I was talking about my visa and my paperwork and stuff. He was like, you need a visa? I was like, yeah, I'm not from the US. He was like, oh, I didn't know that. I thought you were American. I'm like, no, I'm not American. Yeah, and I'm just thinking in my head, I just yank really well, but I think those are the memories that stick out in my head as far as language in the States. But for the most part, it was just, yeah, after the first year, or I should say within the first year, I think within the first month, I just switched my accent to avoid
It
it.
was good to go.
Yeah, and I actually made a friend because when I was doing a presentation in one of my classes, I was really nervous that day. And in being nervous, like I couldn't keep it up. So I slipped into my natural accent and then went back. And then at the end of the class, my friend, the girl came up to me and was like, you're not from here, right? You're from the Caribbean. I was like, yeah. She was like, where is she from? Like, oh, she's from Turks and Caicos. So she's like, okay, I heard your accent there for a second, and we're actually friends till this day. But I actually ended up making a friend because she realized that I was also from the Caribbean, and then my language, my accent switched up. So that was pretty cool.
That's awesome.